This is Our Voices. I'm Mario Trimble. In order to be a place where everyone in our community feels valued and connected, we first have to ensure everyone believes they belong. These are Our Voices, a joint podcast production from the Colorado and Denver Bar Association's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity Joint Steering Committee. Our Voices shines a light on the unique stories, experiences, and backgrounds of our member leaders so that we can help each other walk together. As presiding judge on the Denver County Court bench, Theresa Spahn has been a passionate defender of the court and a champion of access to justice efforts in the city and beyond. From her time as a magistrate in Colorado's 17th Judicial District to her tireless efforts to help create the Office of the Child's Representative or leading the O'Connor Judicial Selection Initiative at the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System to her current role, Judge Spahn has always recognized the role of judges as leaders and models of fairness, impartiality, and integrity. Her judicial philosophy is deeply rooted in her character and her experiences as a Denver native from a large and loving family that instilled in her the value of hard work and community. Let's join Mallory Revel and Linda Moss as they talk with Judge Spahn about her experiences and insights she's gleaned as a judge and a leader.
Welcome to Our Voices. We're so happy that you're joining us today. My name is Mallory Revel, and I'm a criminal defense attorney with Foster Graham, Milstein, and Kalisher. And I'm here with my co-host, Linda Moss, who's a family law attorney with Coombe, Curry, Rich, and Jarvis. Today, we are thrilled to have the presiding judge of the Denver County Courts with us, Judge Theresa Spahn. Welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. I'm so honored to be asked. Thank you.
We're excited to have you. So let's jump right in.
Yeah. So what we're going to do today is essentially just talk about your life, who you are, who you want to be. So let's start at the beginning. Who were you? What was your childhood like?
Oh my gosh, what a question. It's funny because I just recently did a little video because I was privileged to get the CGI award this year. And so they asked the same thing, and I kind of went down memory lane, and you're just like, how do I explain my crazy family? So I think, who was I as a child? I grew up literally right on like 50th and Federal. And wow. Where I grew up, believe me, it was like a rough and tumble neighborhood. It was absolutely crazy. I still actually hang out with some of the people that I grew up with. And we were all pretty much wild children, and I think we had parents who were great human beings who loved us so much, but pretty much like checked out, and we were raising ourselves. And so it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy times when I look back to kind of see all the growing up. I mean, I didn't graduate from high school. I had to go back to night school to get my high school diploma and kind of find my way to college by myself and just kind of forge that path. And especially where I grew up, when I graduated from high school, I think we had 700 or 500 people graduate from our class. But it was because it was big, but not very many people went to college, kind of, where I grew up. I just look back and just say I'm glad I had all those years. Those life experiences have served me well. I had a really crazy, chaotic family who were full of life and fun, and cooking was always going on, and there was always a house where people were literally coming in and out all day long, and on the weekend it was a very spontaneous, chaotic household. I think that's probably where I get my love of people. And I know the CGI award I shared that when I grew up, we had 2 phones in our house. And it was, when I grew up, there were like literally telephones and there weren't any cell phones. So we had a big red phone and a big black phone, and they weighed about 20 pounds each phone. And so when my friends would come over, we'd always have to say, like, don't use the red phone. Like if they were going to call their friends to say we're running late or whatever, we'd say, you can't use the red phone. That's my dad's phone. That's my dad's phone. You can only use the black phone. And because the red phone was my dad's bookie phone. So that's kind of...
I was going to say, was that like your secret line to the president or something?
Exactly. That was the bookie phone that I grew up in. So, and I grew up across the street from my grandparents who were Italian, Angelo and Jenny Mancinelli. Thank God they were there. They were the spilly in our lives. And they really taught us all how to cook and just really value family and friendships and all those things. So that's kind of the crazy neighborhood and household that I grew up in.
And you're a pretty accomplished cook. You cook amazing food, and I think that that's really a way that you share with people and kind of share your heart. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I think that is probably the way that my sister always says. She's very artistic in music and painting, and she's always like, that's kind of your artistic outlet, and it really is. And I really, I think it's really a way that you share, breaking bread with people, they say, is the way that you really bring people together. And for me, it's just, I really love people, and I love nurturing people, and I love people, coming together. And, whenever you set down food in front of anybody, it really kind of changes the dynamic of everybody coming together. And it really is kind of an outlet for me to be really creative. And I think my husband says we can't have any more platters. I literally have platters all over my house. They're all over the wall. They're in my basement. And so it's a love that I have. And I've cooked my whole life. I think I've started working in the restaurant industry and catering when I was about 14 years old. So I've grown up in it. It's what I know, what I love, and I've shared it throughout my career, even through the Women's Bar, doing fundraisers and at the courthouse, any courthouse I've ever worked at. So, yeah, that's a big part of my personality.
That's awesome.
So you mentioned, kind of finding your own way to college. I would assume that the same goes for law school. Will you tell us a little bit about your journey through education?
Well, I went back to night school and got my high school diploma, thank God. And then I just thought, the one thing I will say about my family, even though they kind of didn't provide a lot of, what would I say, structure or guidance. I know they always believed in, all three of us, I have a sister and a brother, and said, you're going to go to college. They didn't really understand what that was or what that meant. And so I remember thinking, look, I feel like I can do this. And so once I got my high school diploma, I applied at Metro, and thank God back in that day, it's now Metro University, right? It was Metro State College back when I went. And they really welcomed non-traditional students. They really gave you a lot of support. Literally, sat you down and taught you how to write a paragraph, because I was just living in a rough and tumble, crazy, wild neighborhood. And so we were having a lot of fun when I was growing up and not learning anything. Mm-hmm. And so they really kind of gave me that foundation. And I think what was really, I remember thinking, I'm just going to get in. I'm just going to give it everything I have, because one thing I do have for my family is a strong work ethic. I can give anything 100%. And so I remember going to Metro and giving it all I had, and then I had A's usually and B's. And I'm like, oh my God, I was just shooting for a C. I was giving it all I had. And so, you start to figure out who you are. Life's about finding out who you are and what your strengths are. And you're like, oh my God, I actually think I can graduate from college, and I think I can do really well. And so, it's also in college, I met a great friend, Diane Dupree, who was a magistrate in Denver for a long time, and she's very well known in our legal community. And she was about 10 years older than me, and she just thought that I was really funny and had a lot of personality, and she had a lot of personality. And so she was kind of I anchored onto her as well, because she, could provide a lot of guidance, and I could kind of see how she was doing things and working, making outlines, studying. And so I just latched onto her, and, if I can find something to follow, I usually can make it on the other side. And so I did that. I waited tables. I've waited tables my whole life. Like I said, been in the industry of food, and then graduated from college. And I was really proud of that. And then I continued to be a waitress for a few years and travel and just have a lot of fun, literally see the world, start traveling a lot. And then one day I woke up and I thought, all right, this can't be it. I got to figure something out. I've got to try something else. And I always kind of had law school in the back of my mind. I actually think it's because of Diane Dupree. She knew that she was going to law school, and that was her path. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking, well, let's see, what can I do? I'm really not smart enough in math and science to be a doctor or go into the medical field. That's not going to work. I started going down the list of things, but I kept thinking, maybe it'll be the same experience that I had when I went to college. Maybe if I give it all I got and I can get in, and I went with the same exact attitude. Worked my tail off to get whatever the LSATs, they were different then. Whatever I needed to get in the front door. I think it was like a 13 or 12. I don't even remember what it was.
All that comes to mind right now is Legally Blonde. So I don't know if I'm going to be very helpful.
So I gave it all I got. I got into law school, and like I said, worked really hard, and I was not an A student in law school, and I worked hard. I gave it all I got. But I'm so happy that I chose that path. I really am. And so here I graduated from law school. Thank God.
Mm-hmm. While you were waiting tables and getting kind of some traveling under your feet, what was your favorite place you visited back then?
Ooh.
I'm trying to think. I actually think, I've had the benefit of kind of, traveling, all over Italy. Back then I went, the first time, one of the first trips I went to London by myself and spent a summer in London. And that was from a girl who grew up in North Denver, and I am not kidding, was never east of North Denver. Look, I'm not kidding. That was, and I went all by myself and I didn't know anybody. And that experience of like living somewhere, living in a flat, I think I was 20 some years old, I can't really remember. And just learning how to do that and how to navigate that and get a passport. Like nobody in my family had a passport, right? Well, I will say that both sets of my grandparents, great-grandparents, or grandparents came from other countries, literally to Denver. But, they came here. Nobody traveled after that. So that was a really great experience. And it was a hard experience because you got to learn a lot about yourself when you're in another country, in another city, and you're trying to make friends, and you're trying to figure it out, and you're 20-some years old. And so that was a great experience. But I have to say that one of my best travels was the first time I went to New York City. I think I was then 18. And back then, when we were 18 in Colorado, we had like 3-2 bars. That's all we had until you were 21. So you could go to bars, but they had 3-2 beer. They don't have that anymore.
Oh.
But in New York City at 18, you could go into a real bar. And I met this wild and crazy gal when I was about 18. She moved to my neighborhood with her family from New York. They grew up in Queens. And her name was Doreen. She's still my dear friend to this day. As a matter of fact, I just texted her. And she was wild and crazy. And I met her and I latched onto her thinking, this gal is going to be fun the rest of my life. And she ended up moving back to New York. And I would wait tables, get enough money, go back, live in Queens with her for a few weeks, go to Manhattan, just do these crazy and bizarre things. You know how you party all night long? I shouldn't be sharing all this in New York, but that was for me, I was just like, oh my God, here I am on 50th and Federal, and like next week I'm going to be like in Manhattan and Queens, just having so much fun. So I just did all things like this, really adventurous and going all kinds of different crazy places.
And love of travel is something that you've always carried with you. What's so significant about travel to you? You've had so many great trips.
I think, too, when you go on a trip, and even sometimes when you're on your trip, there's always ups and downs, right? And you're always like, oh, my God, are we going to make it through this? Or, you run into something that's not working, or you're not having a great day, even though most of your days are amazing whenever you travel. But think about when you come home. They make for the funniest stories, right? Even those most challenging moments, you're like, remember the time when they wouldn't let us off the whatever train, or we couldn't figure out the train, or whatever it was, you come back and laugh. But I think you get out there, you get to meet people in a different culture, and it's really fun. That's my natural, so I think kind of where my innate curiosity goes. It's just like being with people, learning about people. You get to be in their world, and it just makes life experiences that you never forget, right? It just kind of helps that little tapestry of life. It just makes you a really different person. And I think the other thing, too, as Maya Angelou always says, whenever you travel, you realize that the rest of the world loves like you, laughs like you, cry. It's just like a really great experience for me. And it just brings me great joy. And it's really fun to like surround yourself with people who are really adventurous and, really want to travel and have fun. And
yeah.
You mentioned that travel disaster stories make for the funniest stories. Do you have a funny travel disaster story you'd like to share?
I'm trying to think. Believe me, there's plenty of them. I'll just say this. Whenever you travel, you just have days where, you're in the middle of some little place in Italy, and you've got to get to the airport by 4:00 in the morning because you're going to fly into Munich, right? And you get there, and of course, there's nobody there. So you got to turn in your car. Where do we put the key? Like, it's always something, right? You've got a whole bunch of people like, well, where do we leave the rent-a-car? And now where do you put the keys? Do we just like leave them in the car and it's on my charge card? And you try to get everybody in the airport, and then you finally get on this plane, and then you roll into Munich, and there's like, I just remember there was, yet another disaster when we got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. So, whenever you travel, you just have those days where you think, oh my God, this is exhausting. I still hope that car is not going to be on my visa when I get back to America. But I think the thing that I always learned that's really kind of the bigger part of the story is a long time ago, I just have this great group of friends that I travel with, and we call it dropping and drinking, especially when you go to like Italy or France or something, right? There, at any corner, you could just say like, we cannot figure it out. We're exhausted, and we're going to drop. You sit down, it's 11 o'clock in the day, order a little Prosecco, a little glass of white wine, a little snack, and all of a sudden everybody gets nice again, even when you're being naughty to each other, right? And so I just have to add one more thing. My kid, who's traveled a lot with us all over, since he was about 11 with a whole bunch of women, one time he was in a people-to-people program in high school where they were going to travel abroad and be ambassadors, for the United States. And they had to take all these classes before they went, and parents had to be in the back. And they were trying to get them ready for those disastrous moments. And they said, there's going to be times when it's going to be difficult, and you're going to miss your family, and you're going to be sad. And, any ideas on what we can do? And I'm like, oh my God. And my kid raised his hand, and he said, this is true. Drop and drink. That's what my family does. Oh my God, I didn't say that.
He's representing the family.
Exactly. Drop and drink.
So let's move into your legal career. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in the law and your journey to being the presiding judge of Denver County Courts.
Well,
it's all in one breath.
There we go. I think, when I look back, of course, I was waiting tables when I was in law school because that's how I made money. That's how I survived. That's how I paid my rent my whole life. And so when I graduated, it was really hard then. I kept applying for jobs, and I would usually make the final cut for the interview, but I really didn't have a lot of experience because I'd grown up in the restaurant industry, right? And so I'm telling you, I went on in 40 interviews, and I would never get the job. So then I started getting really brave. I would just interview thinking, I'm not going to get it. I'm just throwing everything out there, right? Putting myself out there. And finally, I got a job with Gene Chancho. And that was my first job. I was his associate. It was a perfect match because nobody else would have put up with the craziness of me being a lawyer for the first few years. But Gene Chancho, thank you, Gene, for giving my first job. And I remember when I look back working for him, because he was such a phenomenal lawyer. He was so great with people. I'd watch him how he'd handle our clients. I'd watch him when he was in court. He was a great trial lawyer, especially in the criminal arena. And I was the worst lawyer. I'm not even kidding. It took me a long time to learn to be a good lawyer. And I did the domestic work, and I would go into court, and I would represent people, and I knew I sucked. There's no other better expression.
Yeah, why do you say that you were so bad?
Oh my God, trust me. You had to be in there, and you're just thinking. I remember one time I was representing this person in the magistrate in Adams County, Randall Davis then, now he's a judge, said, I had to lay a foundation to get the decree approved. I didn't even know that, right? And so he just looked at me and started asking the questions. Every day was a train wreck when I went to court. And then I would come back and I would cry to Gene, and I'm like, we have to give those people their money back. And I meant it. We cannot take their money in good faith. That was crazy. And I gave it all. I was always prepared. I always worked really hard. And he was so funny. He's like, we're not giving their money back. You did a fine job. But I really realized that I really had to learn how to be in the courtroom and how to, stand up in the courtroom and learn about evidence. It's just such a overwhelming, daunting task, it seemed like, to learn how to do that and manage clients. I mean, I knew the law and I knew how to manage clients, but going into the courtroom was just... So my friend Heather Turner said, why don't you think about being a DA? I'm like, well, there you go, because, it's so bad I'm thinking about going to work at King Soopers. I don't know. I'm about ready to take a different career path. I don't know. And so I got a job at the DA's office, and that's another funny story. It goes back to my crazy family. So my dad grew up in Denver. He went to Manual High School. He was a very big personality. Everybody knew, and he was a big gambler in Denver. Everybody knew that. And so when I went to apply to be a DA, I just was so ready to try to learn how to be a lawyer. And I wanted this job so bad. And I was so nervous. And I practiced why I want to be a DA. And I sat down with Jim Smith, who was then the elected DA, who's like one of the most beautiful human beings I've ever worked for. And Bob Grant was then the assistant DA, who later on went on to be the DA in Adams County. And I was ready for like the softball question you always get, why do you want to be a DA? And this is true. I will never forget as long as I live. Jim Smith looked at me and goes, are you related to Ron and Dawn Spahn?
Gosh.
And I'm like, oh my God, that's my father and his twin brother. And I just thought, I remember thinking, I was so lost. And I go, why? I didn't even say like anything. I said, why?
Why?
And he said, well, I don't want to incriminate myself, but they ran a pretty good crap game down at Club Ida. And I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
That was my crazy family always coming back to haunt me like at every, like, so funny. So I remember looking at him and saying, I really need this job. Please give me this job. Anyway, I went on to the DA's office, and I'm not just being funny. We all worked in this like trailer back then. At this really, the courthouse was like this weird round thing, and we all worked at trailers, and it was so funny. We'd get dressed up for work and go to work every day, and then march over to the round building and do your trials as a DA. And there was about 10 of us, I think, that were little county court DAs, and we had so much fun. We were just a great group of working together. But I, again, sucked for the first 6 months. And I had Judge Romano, who's one of my first judges, thank God, who's retiring this week. I just sent him a love note talking about all of this. And every day, I think I caused a million mistrials. I'm like, why can't I say that about why can't the defendant put on evidence? I mean, I learned everything the hard way. And it really started but I learned. And I really started to learn how to do a trial, and I started to learn how to lay a foundation, and it started to become part of me and ingrained in me. And that just started to create a path for me that really seemed to work. So I was a slow learner when I started out, and then I went on to, be a felony DA, and I loved growing up as a lawyer in Adams County. It really was an honor to grow up there. The judges really made us all be professional, made us all treat each other with respect. They treated us with respect. We treated everybody fairly. We learned a lot. We grew up there, as lawyers, and learned a lot. And I was really honored to go on to be a district court magistrate there. And I think, every time I went to a new level in my career, it just opens up doors for you that you never, and I know, Mallory, I've talked to you about this, you can't see what's coming sometimes. Sometimes you don't know the opportunities you're going to have. Sometimes you shouldn't try to control where you want to go, right? It's not you can't look into the crystal ball. And I remember when I became a district court magistrate, Judge Bachman, who was then the chief judge, had me serve on a lot of committees to kind of represent Adams County point of view. There was a lot of reform going on in children in the area of juvenile law and dependency neglect law. And so I kind of brought that perspective because I was hearing very many different diverse dockets. And that's kind of where I just shot into working, with the Colorado Women's Bar Association, the CBA. I served on a lot of committees there and just started to open up my world. And I really became so much of a better lawyer and a better jurist, too, working because you learn what other people are doing in other jurisdictions. You're bringing new ideas back to your jurisdiction. And so I think that was kind of the beginning of my career, and that was a big jumping off point for me.
So I'm really curious because I'm a young attorney and I know a lot of young attorneys, and hearing you talk repeatedly about how horrible of an attorney you are, I'm
Which
curious.
I doubt a little bit, by the way.
I doubt it, and I also think that it sounds like you were in the learning process. And so I'm wondering, were you seeing other young attorneys at that time who seemed to be doing significantly better than you were?
Yes.
Really?
I was right in my courtroom every single day. I would go back to the trial office and they'd be like, how'd you do today? I'm like, I didn't make it past halftime. I am not kidding. I don't know what it was. I remember when I started out being a DA, Liz Perez-Castle was my assigned PD. Believe me, she would tell you oh my God, there was DA blood all over the courtroom every single day. It was just for some reason it was something that was hard for me to kind of pull together. But I also think I was competent, right? So I didn't get fired, thank God.
Right.
Every day I thought I was going to get fired. But, actually that reminds me of another story. When I went to district court, because then I learned how to be a lawyer and how to do a trial. And I was advanced to district court. And I remember, when you feel like, what do they call that? When you just feel like, oh my God, I'm a fraud.
Imposter
syndrome. That's what it's called. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, I've been district court. And they didn't, whatever fell in your prelim week was yours. Everything from attempted murder down to like a criminal trespass. It was yours. And you're like, oh my God, I'm responsible. This isn't DUI land anymore, right? This is like the big stuff. I'm playing with the big boys and girls now. And I just remember thinking, I'm an imposter. How am I going to manage this? And I was so stressed out. And once again, Jim Smith, my boss, who asked me about the crap, came down at Club Ida. I was walking down the hall. I was trying to act like I was really confident, and I was trying to hide my stress. And he's like, hey, he had this office. He always kept the door open. He always read the newspaper, and this big fish behind him. I'll never forget it. And he really didn't go out to the courthouse very often or anything. But he ran a great office, but he was kind of at the office all the time. So he goes, hey, Therese, come here for a sec. I'm like, okay. So I sat down in his office. He goes, I want to tell you a story. I'm like, okay. He said, so he tells me this story of this really horrible, aggravated murder case or something like that. It was like a horrible case. And then Judge Enzer, who just retired from the Adams County bench last year, they were the 2 DAs that tried this case. And he went through how horrible it was and the victims. And I was just like, oh, my God. He goes, and you know what? We lost. And I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh my God. And he goes, and you know what? And I go, what? He goes, we still got a paycheck. He's like, relax. You need to relax. It was like so funny. I mean, that was his way of saying like, you need to relax. You are where you need to be, and it was like moments like that just, you look back at it, you think, oh my God. And that is it's exactly how we did it. And you think, okay, I'm where I need to be. I need to have confidence in myself. I need to relax and I need to trust I'm where I'm supposed to be.
And then, of course, you go on to build a huge, brand new government office from the ground up. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
That, I have to say, I was on the bench for 7 years in Adams County. I started in 1994 as a district court magistrate. Only the second woman ever in the history of district court in Adams County. That's brought a lot of experiences that could be for a whole nother conversation, but I love the judges I worked with and what I did. But I remember when I was in the courtroom, like especially in dependency and neglect courtrooms, and I grew up in a criminal justice system where the public defenders are always some of the best lawyers in the courtroom. So I knew what state lawyers could do. I was a state lawyer. I would just see that the children who no one saw, they could be 9 months old, only the caseworker. No, people were representing them and never saw them, never met them, never talked to anybody, and never litigated, never filed a motion, never did an appeal. It was foreign to me. And I remember when they created it was an idea, the Office of the Child's Representative. I actually served on the committee under Justice Corliss then, kind of looking at dependency neglect reform, and that's when all the reform was going on. I was just a representative, a committee member. And when they introduced a House Bill 1371, I think in 2000, to create the first state agency in the nation to pull together all the best interest representation, all the attorneys, and create it like alternate defense counsel. Actually, alternate defense counsel was created a few years earlier. And I didn't even envision myself like applying for that job or wanting to do that job. But then one day when I had the Colorado Lawyer and I was reading it, and they were talking about, I think they had an article just kind of setting it up because it was coming out of the state legislature. And I remember thinking, oh my God, maybe I could do that. Remember again, maybe I could do that. And I just started thinking, and I remember I talked to Diane Dupree, who I've talked about earlier, and she's like, what an opportunity. You will never regret that. And so I jumped in and took House Bill 1371 without a pencil, without an office, without an employee, without a phone number, without anything. And Brian Sheehay, who was then head of alternate defense counsel, helped me so much, and started a state agency. And it is some of the hardest work I've ever done, just trying to create an agency, trying to change a culture. I had to change a legal culture. Sometimes you had to fire people. You had to create I left an $18 million agency, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's probably the thing I'm most proud of. It really is. It's just, I'm proud that I really feel like I changed a culture. And my whole goal the whole time was to give children lawyers that I saw at the public defender's office. I saw an alternate defense counsel. And so I feel like I did that.
How logistically, how do you create or change a culture?
That is really hard because I've worked
How
really
do you
hard on that
change
the
a
last few years. That actually changing a culture is the hardest thing to do. It is where you have to like look at yourself and find the absolute best leadership skills and strategically think about things. I had a vision when I applied to be the first director of OCR, and I worked for a commission or a board that was 9 people, but represented every congressional district, just like the Public Defender's Commission and Alternate Defense Counsel Commission. And when I went in, I had a vision. I knew where I was going because I really gave a lot of thought to it. And I thought, and I had the benefit of seeing Alternate Defense Counsel built too, right? And so I had that benefit. But I just sat down and had a long-term plan. I think one of my better skills is really kind of plotting and planning and thinking, there's all these pieces, I'm going to put it together. The first thing I did is I told my board, I said, we're just going to take a year, we're going to roll over these contracts because we're not going to make any knee-jerk reactions. I'm going to go to every part of the state and meet every lawyer, every judge, every Department of Health and Human Services. I'm going to meet everybody, and we're going to come back and we're going to see where we are. Like, what do we really need to change? Do we really need to overhaul everything? It's just my experience in Adams County. I don't know. And we're going to gather as much information as possible, and we're going to get to know all these people, and we're going to get to know this culture, and then we're going to come back and we're going to have a plan. And I did that. I went to every part of the state. I saw every courthouse in the state, which was amazing. I met, to this day, some judges I still see. And I came back and I learned a lot. I learned that in rural jurisdictions, there was a lot of good work going on. People were paid hourly. There were, in a lot of front range jurisdictions, things were, nobody was seeing children. They didn't feel the need to. And then I thought, okay, now we're going to make everybody in the state interview, which was really controversial, and we're going to make them reapply for their jobs. And it's not going to just be me, because everybody will say, oh, just that crazy woman came along, and we're going to build little interview panels in each community. We're going to have a local volunteer, maybe a legislator, I don't know, somebody who's known in the community, that like a CASA volunteer maybe. And so then I went back into each judicial district and built all these groups of people, and we interviewed. And I made it clear that, here's you applying for a job, here's what we're looking for. We want people who are going to litigate. We want people who are going to be strong. We're going to have, and we also recruited a lot of retired public defenders. I robbed a lot of the DA's offices, kind of, took from there and encouraged people to apply. And the other thing I knew, that the way we paid people made no sense. And I remember saying then they would just give you a flat fee, like $1,000 for, I think, 2 years of the life of the case. So if I gave you $1,000, and then I was working with Brian Shea, he said, if I gave the alternate defense counsel attorney $1,000, do you think I'd have a lot of motions hearings or jury trials? No. It was the way they paid people, and you couldn't get out of that. They were stuck in that because of budget issues. And people always say, well, children, it's easy to advocate for children. It's really not, because people don't ever they don't give money to teachers, right? I'm telling you, it's really not an easy place to advocate. We didn't have any strong constitutional rights to stand on. But I just said, I'm building it just like that. It's going to be just like the criminal defense world and what we've built in Colorado with public defenders. Pay them right, give them a reasonable caseload, make sure that we give them trial skills. And so I had a map, but I knew where I was going, and I just kept trying to figure out how to get there. And somehow, in the middle of a budget crisis, we convinced our joint budget committee to convert us to hourly, maybe a few jurisdictions at a time, and pay like alternate defense counsel, to get away from that flat fee. And I fired a large amount of people, and that was really hard because it was our livelihood. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We brought in new people, and we started building things like we were the agency that provided training, we provided trial help, we got the state rate up. I took a run at it about 2 or 3 times with Brian Sheehy and Lindy Froelich, and we were able to get the state rate up. And so, I had this, I knew what I was going. I think I even looked at the ABA standards for criminal defense best practices, and I just kept running at it, figuring out how to get there. And I think one of the most important things I did then was just I had to have good relationships with everybody, both sides of the aisle, at the state capitol, I had to have good relationships with alternate defense counsel. All those relationships mattered and let me leave, I think, a really effective agency.
You've talked about a couple of the challenges that you've faced, and obviously now as presiding judge in Denver County Court, you've accomplished a lot of change, from bond reform to procedures to be much more efficient and value the public's time. In so many different areas, there's been so much progress. Now we're in 2020, and we're dealing with COVID-19, and you are kind of steering the ship for our court system in Denver. What does that look like in relation to all these other challenges that you have tackled and had your map and overcome? Where are we with COVID?
Well, COVID has been obviously something none of us in our lifetime saw coming, right? And I'm really proud because I work with, there's 18 judges in Denver County Court, and all 17 of the people that I work with are amazing. We have a common vision. We work closely together. And I remember in March, we were literally the judges have a retreat the last few years. And we set our goals for the year, and we have a common vision. And that day was March 13th. I will never, and we had our agenda. We had, Justice Samore kicking us off in the morning, which is always the great way to start your breakfast. And, and then all of a sudden we realized there was this thing, COVID. And I think it was really Judge Smith who said, this is real. We have to deal with it. And I think I don't think any jurisdictions yet had shut down. Justice Coates had not entered the order yet of no jury trials. And we just turned the whole day over to, and it was really hard for me to go there, to tell you the truth, right? I'm like, what? I'm going to shut down a courthouse? Like, who thinks like that, right? I mean, we have the largest court system in the state. We do 100,000 cases a year. And I'm like, I'm just going to shut down. Can I do this? Do I have the legal authority to do this? How is this going to impact people? What about people who have cases set? And then I just realized, and we literally went on Monday into mode of, we had no computers because we all had desktops, right, for all of our employees and judges. And I think by Monday or Tuesday, we somehow figured out how to send our staff home, keep the courts open that we had to and should keep open. Like, when you're arrested, the bond setting courts and the protection order court, figured out how to shut everything else down and get all of our employees home, which was unheard of, get computers out there. And then once we got that done, go back to like, okay, how do we bring everybody back? And actually, I can take no credit. We have the most amazing IT team, this little group of people under Jonathan, my court executive, my judges, everybody. I just sat there and said, this is what we have to do. And I was practically paralyzed, and they actually figured out how to do everything. And now today I just did a virtual docket for Judge Eddie the last couple of days, and I'm so impressed with how well it's working. But that was a crazy time, just because you think, really, the judicial system is never shut down, right? In America, that's the first time we've ever had to shut it down. And can we do this? And how do we do this? And how do we go virtual? And how do we send employees home? And how do we keep people safe? And we just refined things and revisited things. Like literally within the first few weeks, the few courts we had open, we're like, okay, can't have people coming in the courtroom. We just kept going at it and being really flexible and not digging our heels in on any one idea, and keeping everybody else positive is really hard, right? Mm-hmm. And keeping everybody feeling safe. But also then you have to say at some point, we're an essential service. We are a court system. We have to show up and do things. COVID has, I just think we are all exhausted, not just in the court system, just in life. We are exhausted. It has been so hard.
What do you do for self-care other than, we've talked about cooking, we've talked about travel, now we're exhausted. How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I hate to say this, but I'm just going to be honest, happy hour.
Yeah.
Like, really, I'm not kidding, right?
It's okay, you're allowed to have happy hour.
I need a happy hour. I just think I really do. You come home, you relax, you enjoy your family, you enjoy your friends. I know, there was a time that we were all stay at home, and then we all got to be together again, and go out to restaurants and spend time together. And we're still hanging in there trying to spend time together. I don't know how long that's going to last right now.
Yeah, it seems like
But
Glad
I
we
just
cherished
think,
it.
honestly, I exercise a lot. I love to hike. I'm really an outdoors person. I know every part of our mountains from the Western Slope down to the San Luis Valley. I know every part of Colorado because I'm a big outdoors person. But that is a real love for me. But I have to say, it's just, like I could live in Italy or in France and have like a little table outside some little restaurant just every day. Like, I'm here for happy hour. Anybody ready? Like,
Drop
I'm
and
sorry,
drink.
that's me. Drop and drink.
Oh my gosh, I love that saying so much.
COVID is life's drop and drink.
Oh yeah, pretty much.
So as we are kind of winding down time-wise, we have to ask, what's next for you? What do you want to accomplish next?
Who will Judge Spahn be?
I have had the greatest career. I have done so many things I never imagined that I could do, would do. I've just done so many amazing things. And I think, I'm 61 years old and where am I going to go next? And I think, it's time really for me to start looking at handing off the presiding judge to somebody else. And I'm really looking forward to going back and just getting back into a courtroom. And I've loved being the presiding judge. It's been an honor, but I also really miss the courtroom. And I really just want to get back in there and be the best judge that I can be. That's really what I want to do, and I'm looking really forward to it. And, brush up on evidence, get to know the law. And just, I think the thing, too, about COVID is that all the little things really matter, right? You think like, God, I didn't appreciate so much. I took so much for granted. And I think just getting in and just taking every single case and every single person and every single lawyer, everybody who walks into the courtroom, if we ever get back to that, or virtually, and just knowing that how I treat them and what I do matters and makes a difference in their life. That's kind of my next. I don't see myself having any extended career. I mean, I think, I really missed the bench and I found my way back. I loved my job as a magistrate, and I always knew in the back of my mind I was going to come home, I call it, to the court system. And I'm so lucky to be a Denver County Court judge, believe me. And I'm home, and this is where I'm going to wrap up my career. And so I'm looking forward to that transition.
Awesome.
I have to ask you, how does mentorship fit into that? Because I can attest, as many of our listeners can, that you are the world's best mentor.
Oh, thank you.
And there's so many people in our legal community that are endlessly grateful to you for that. So how does mentorship factor into you getting back into the courtroom and working presumably with some younger lawyers as well?
I think what I love about Colorado is our bar really is small. We still know each other. We still care about each other. We still work on committees together. Whatever bar it is. And I just think mentorship has always been, I sit here today because of the people who reached out. Believe me, you have no idea, have pulled me forward since I was probably about 13 years old. And I always feel it's an obligation to give back, and I enjoy it, right? And I think I had many people say, you can do this. I remember, like, are you sure? Do you think I can really do this? Do you really? And I really love when I see people, and see that they have so much potential in them, and just really encouraging them to keep going forward. And I just love mentoring people in the courtroom. It brings me great joy. And I have so many mentors that I owe so much to. So I really think it's our obligation, but I really, really enjoy it.
I have one more question, a little bit out of turn. But on that note, do you ever have the opportunity to see those young lawyers who are like you were, where they come into your courtroom and are like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing?
You better not say me, so help you.
You are a great lawyer.
And how do you address them? How do you, deal with those people who are like, oh God, why am I even here?
Well, I actually remember what it's like. Like, I would never forget what it's like, right? And so a lot of times I'll have student lawyers in my court from DU, or I will have new lawyers. In county court, you have new lawyers. And I just think as long as they're prepared, that is the one thing, is like, you owe me as the judge, you need to come in prepared, and you need to give it the best you've got, right? and that's because you have to learn. You have to learn how to do everything. And And once they're prepared, I just feel like I hope that I'm really patient, and I hope that I'm kind. I think we all have to be kind to each other. And I'm always happy to talk to people afterwards. I think just by being in a courtroom when you can't lay a foundation and you keep trying, right? I've been there. And so I'll do that. But I just think you have to be patient. And, we have to start here, and we're all going to get to be really experienced lawyers. And there's no one that comes in and knows how to do it all, right? And so I like watching people learn, and I'm really patient and kind. I think it's really okay you got to be brave. You're going to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And teaching from the bench is invaluable in county court. We've talked with a few other folks about that. It's really an art. Obviously, you have to stay in your lane and be appropriate, but at the same time, after a trial, welcoming a young lawyer back and answering their questions and talking to them about their case presentation. That is huge.
I think it's huge, and I enjoy doing it. And the judges that I appeared in front of in county court, not only Judge Romano, but all the judges, their door was always open. You could always go talk to them. The other thing I did a lot was watch other trials. I would, to this day, I like to go watch a trial because I learn something every time I watch a trial. So, but I think mentoring is so important. And it's not even just about being a lawyer. It's about, especially just even as women still, or, having somebody cheer you on or encourage you and just you can do this. Come on, let's go do it. Let's make a plan. It really makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, look at our Alexis King.
Our Alexis King.
I hate to say that. She's going to kill me if she hears this. She was a magistrate who was phenomenal in Denver County Court, and she came from the Jefferson County DA's office. She was one of the best jurists I've ever seen. And one day we were talking, she's like, I don't know, I'm thinking I should run for DA, and I don't know, what do you think? I'm like, oh my God, you could do this, right? And look where she is. She's our first female Jefferson County DA. Yay.
So proud.
I'm so proud of her.
So proud. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for today, but it has been such a pleasure to visit with you. We appreciate your time so much, and thank you for being here.
Oh,
and for
thank
everything
you.
that you do for our
Thank you.
community.
I so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
This has been Our Voices. For more information on today's guest, or to get involved, please check out the CBA podcast page at cobar.org/podcast. That's cobar.org/podcast. This podcast series was created by members of the Colorado and Denver Bar Associations. Our Voices is a collaborative effort of the EDI Joint Steering Committee messaging team, including Mallory Revel, Linda Moss, Bonnie Schreiner, Mallory Hasbrook, Mo Watson, Mario Trimble, Courtney Holm, and Emmy Lopez, with our CBA Communications Team Director, Heather Folker, and Manager, Charles McGarvey. Our recording engineer is Rick Ponteleone of Lionsbridge Recording. Our producer and editor is Courtney Holm, with theme and introduction by Mario Trimble. This podcast is made possible because of the support of the Colorado and Denver Bar Associations. On behalf of all of us, thanks for listening to Our Voices.